going on, you guys? It's your boy Patrick, aka Addicted to Combat, back for another week of UFC action. We have UFC Vegas 69 on deck this Saturday, headlined by the women's flyweight bout, Jessica Andrade versus Blanchfield. So short notice main event, switch up at the last second here, but we've got 11 fights on the card featuring a lot of debuting fighters, some returning guys after layoffs, and just some general, lackluster matchups in my opinion. So the betting spots will be a little bit hard to pinpoint this week, but I've got a few that I like already I will touch on in this video. 11 fights, so the breakdown should be pretty short compared to normal. And it's just kind of not the most exciting card compared to this past weekend with a champion versus champion matchup, but that's to be expected. At UFC 284, we did pretty well profit-wise, made a good chunk of money. The violence props did not go our way, but we put our money behind 6 fighters, 2 money lines, and 2 parlays, and they all cashed for us. So happy to move forward into this week, try to make some more money. And thanks for getting me to 700 subscribers, you guys. I do appreciate everybody that tunes in week and week out. If you're new, hit the like, hit the subscribe, and let's keep this channel growing. And without further ado, let's break into the first fight of the prelims. First fight of the night is at flyweight between Juan Camilo Ronderos and Clayton Carpenter. It's a spot where Carpenter is making his debut at 26 years old, a 6-0 professional record, and he's off of the Dana White Contender Series this past season where he scored an impressive 3-round decision victory, overcoming some adversity over a good fighter in that bout. Now, Juan Camilo Ronderos is 28 years old, so still fairly young. He did make his debut on short notice against David Dvorak almost 2 years ago. It was a huge test. Even at that point, Dvorak was ranked, 10th or 11th in the division. So against the 4-0 inexperienced Juan Camilo, that was just a layup for David Dvorak, who got a club and sub victory in 2 minutes in that fight. So where has Juan Camilo Ronderos been? Well, he had a suspension for a failed drug test, weed and cocaine after that short notice bout. So that says some things right there. Not judging his lifestyle so much, but John Jones can get away with that type of behavior. But if you're making your debut in the UFC, I mean, what are you doing? But even after that, he was out of training for the better part of a year for some elbow injury. Already sloppy on the feet the last time we saw him. Not very durable, not very defensively sound. He seems to need to get the fight to the mat to really do his better work with a ground and pound and a couple of submissions on his record. Light level of competition. The best fight that he had was a 5-round bout between him and former UFC veteran Eric Shelton, and that was a split decision win for Juan Camilo Ronderos, who actually was on the defense and getting taken down most of the fight. His takedown defense didn't look very good, and he got pretty much outworked, but landed the better strikes on the defense, so they gave it to him. Now, Clayton Carpenter, lifetime martial artist, Muay Thai experience, a pretty long resume of amateur MMA experience. He competed in the IBJJF grappling, so this guy has got accuracy, power, technique, speed, cardio, and the ability to actually take the fight to the mat if he wants to as well. So in that fight against Edgar Chairez on the Contender Series, who was a very good opponent, powerful striker with good technique from the Entram gym, Clayton Carpenter endured some early damage, showed toughness, resolve, and made those in-fight adjustments between rounds 1 and 2 to start wrestling more and just outpacing and outworking Chairez to the victory in that fight. So I don't see a spot where Juan Camilo is better than Clayton Carpenter. I know it's kind of hard to pay minus 275 on a debuting fighter, but I just don't see where Clayton Carpenter loses this fight. I think he does win inside the distance, probably with the striking. So give me Carpenter pretty confidently. I have bet him at that minus 275 line. Up next at welterweight, we've got the returning AJ Fletcher taking on a debuting Themba Gorimbo. And if you've not heard of Themba Gorimbo, this guy has been a pretty good prospect for a while. The UFC's been trying to get him in, or at least on the Contender Series, but due to visa issues over in Africa, Gorimbo has not been able to make the walk to the cage until this Saturday. He is the champion, or was the champion in EFC in South Africa, the promotion where some notable names recently like Dricus du Plessis, the young Cameron Simon, those guys have come out of. Gorimbo is actually from Zimbabwe, and he kind of has like one of those Ngannou origin stories, right, where he's struggling, crossing country lines, smuggling diamonds and things like that, working in the blood diamond mines. So kind of a cool backstory, but Gorimbo is, due to his record, he's a submission specialist, a very active guard, and actually has some good front chokes as well. But at range, he's a very technical kickboxer, and he seems to kind of untechnically fall apart in close distances. Up close against the cage, he can brawl and be hittable. He also doesn't have the best takedown defense either, and that's how he suffered defeat in some of the fights that I've seen. He's got a 10-3 professional record. AJ Fletcher, he was 9-0 coming into the UFC, had a spectacular flying knee knockout on the Contender Series. A very short, stocky, muscular build for the 25-year-old. AJ Fletcher's like a power wrestler, trained under the UFC veteran Tim Crater since he was a teenager. So AJ Fletcher, he's 0-2 in the UFC. He had a very spectacular debut against Matt Semmelsberger. Looked very good, did some good damage. Just lost some key transitions on the mat as he slowed down late in the fight and lost the close decision. After that, he almost knocked out Ange Lusa, but Ange is very durable and let Fletcher gas himself out trying to end the fight. And then Fletcher was just a corpse. The rest of that ended up on bottom position for the majority of round 2 and 3. So lost that decision as well. So what do we do with AJ Fletcher? I do think he's the better, of course, wrestler in this matchup. His takedowns are very powerful and well-timed. And I think he's the better technical striker as well, and just a more dangerous man here. So he's a minus 240 favorite over Themba, who's the plus 190 underdog in his debut. Not a spot where I want to trust AJ Fletcher at minus 240. This guy, like I said, he's going to be at a huge reach disadvantage. I don't think that should be too much of an issue when he gets the fight to the mat. Fletcher's a very potent finisher, 4 knockouts, 4 submissions across his 9 wins. Now, I don't know. I just don't want to trust Fletcher. I got to see more from this guy, see if he can learn to conserve his energy as the fight goes on, if he doesn't end the fight inside the distance. So I'm going to take him to win this fight. I even think Fletcher is live to get a submission. I've seen Gorimbo really struggle to get back up to his feet, give up his back, and things like that. So give me Fletcher. I think a ground and pound happens, maybe even jumps guillotine on Themba and wins that way. But not going to trust Fletcher on the money line, but I do think he wins. Up next at lightweight, we've got Nazim Sadykhov taking on Evan Elder. This is Sadykhov's first walk to the UFC octagon after a successful Dana White Contender Series round 3 knockout last season. Evan Elder is making his second walk to the cage, but the first time down at his normal weight class at lightweight. Evan Elder did suffer his first professional loss at the hands of Preston Parsons up at 170 last spring, and it was a pretty good effort for Evan Elder. He survived a lot in that fight, the toughest fight he'd ever been in his undefeated professional career at that point. And as a striker, he got taken down and, threatened with submissions on the ground. He got beat up by elbows and ground and pound strikes and never gave up trying to get back to his feet or advance to top position. And at the end of the fight, he actually showed the cardio and the tenacity to gain that top position a couple of times. So Nazim Sadykhov is primarily a boxer. This guy has got very good power, 5 knockouts out of his 7 wins, and his only loss was in his debut by submission. Sadykhov has fought in Fury FC and CFFC. He's a very fast and kind of like a reactive counter-striking southpaw striker. So mostly uses the jab to find his range and then fires with that left straight. Some vicious hooks as well, and devastating clinch knees. The knees are one of his most dangerous weapons for Sadykhov, who's 28 years old, training out of the Serra Longo camp. Evan Elder is actually at Killcliff or Sanford MMA, so both of these guys coming into the UFC out of very credible camps, and neither of them have been finished by strikes yet, so they're both durable as well. Sadykhov probably has the better boxing. I'd say Evan Elder, I think, has the better kickboxing. He's got very good use of low kicks. Body kicks are accurate and fast. He can hit you with the 1-2, Evan Elder, and then come down with the high kick, or start with the high kick and then come down with the 1-2 pretty accurately. So he had a round 3 win in the FAC promotion before making his debut in the UFC, and he won that basically off of debilitating calf kicks and then ground and pound. So the guy's got pretty good toughness. He's shown that he can actually try to work his way back into a fight even when he's on short notice and up a weight class. Not saying that that's a reason you should be betting on a fighter alone. Sadykhov looks extremely dangerous, but I've seen Sadykhov fight when he's in the driver's seat, never against a high level of opposition, except for the Ahmad Hassanzada, who he fought on the Contender Series. But still, he cut Hassanzada early and then really just dominated in the driver's seat the whole fight, and was actually hit a few times in that fight pretty cleanly. And even in some of his low-level regional scene footage, I've seen Sadykhov clipped and actually stumbled pretty badly, but hasn't been put out yet. Evan Elder, I just think, has actually seen the upper level of competition in Preston Parsons, up a weight class. He showed that he's got the grit and the tenacity to keep going if this goes late and if this gets to be a tough fight. Also, Evan Elder, his takedown offense and wrestling is actually a work in progress, coming along pretty well. So I think between the leg kicks, the wrestling, and just the will to win and endure a bad spot in this fight, I will pick Evan Elder as the underdog here. He's a plus 145 underdog. Not something I intend to bet just yet. I still have to learn about these guys down at lightweight. I think Sadykhov is a very dangerous threat to win the fight. But either man could win it by strikes, but I think Evan Elder would win it in most worlds by decision. So if this gets dirty, give me Evan Elder as the upset win here. Light heavyweight bout up next between Ovince St. Preux and Felipe Lins. Two guys at 205 who are in their late 30s and have both seen better days. Their best days are way behind them. Ovince St. Preux used to be a very dangerous guy on the feet and on the mat. Felipe Lins, a monstrous pressure fighter, brawler early in the fight, going 4-0 with all finishes in the PFL in 2018, and now kind of falling flat in the UFC. He still has a 15-5 professional record, 26-16 for Ovince St. Preux, who once challenged John Jones unsuccessfully. But yeah, I mean, is the durability falling apart for both of these guys? Possibly. Felipe Lins is a guy who has always been finished in his losses. He got flatlined a couple of times, especially by Tanner Boser in the UFC. As well as Ovince St. Preux lost by knockout to Tanner Boser as well. And Tanner Boser, not very much of a power threat, but Ovince St. Preux also lost by knockout to Jamal Hill. That one is more forgivable. But what's not forgivable is Ovince's performance last May against Mauricio Shogun Rua, who was definitely on his last legs there, washed up past his time, and Ovince took him to a low striking output, boring 3-round decision where it was a split decision win for St. Preux. I just believe that St. Preux is fighting as a counter-striker these days, not very enthusiastic to get in there and make the first mistake. So since Shogun wasn't pressuring him, he didn't really have anything to do. So I think Ovince is still dangerous with his kicks. That left southpaw straight, probably still powerful. He could probably catch Felipe Lins rushing in wildly in round one if that happens. Lins doesn't have the best striking defense. Even in some of his fights in Bellator and the PFL, he was losing those fights and hurt pretty badly before he found a way to win. But I got to trust Felipe Lins in this fight. As long as he doesn't take the fight to the mat, into the danger zone of the grappling of St. Preux, I think Lins should do more to at least win a decision over 3 rounds, just from aggression, forward pressure, at least attempting and landing some significant strikes. So give me Felipe Lins reluctantly to win this fight, but neither guy is in good health. I mean, the fight miles of Ovince St. Preux, way more professional fights than Lins, but Lins has dealt with a knee injury since 2014, and it still to this day in the past couple of years has been the reason why he's pulled out of fights. So if this fight even happens, if Felipe Lins makes it to the scale, I do pick him to win, but there's no way he should be a minus 220 favorite in this spot. Even the overs and unders, I don't have a good lead on. You would look for the under based off of their records and their combined violence statistics here, but Ovince St. Preux, if he's not given the opportunity to counter-strike, it's hard to believe that he's going to contribute to that under in this fight. So a total pass betting-wise, but give me Felipe Lins by decision. Up next at featherweight, we've got the returning Jamal Emmers after a 1.5-year-long layoff, welcoming a debuting Russian to the UFC, Hussein Askhabov, only 28 years old, and it's been a while since we've seen Askhabov fight as well, like a 3-year-long layoff. Jamal Emmers, 33 years old, and at 5'10" with a long reach, big for the weight class. He's been in the UFC for about 3 years, has only had 3 fights, going 1-2 in those. So even though Emmers does have some wrestling in his background, I think some high school and maybe a little tiny bit of college as well, he loves the striking. He's got the frame for it, very light on his feet, devastating knees, some good kicks, and like a long cross as well. He even challenged Giga Chikadze in his debut to a striking battle in round 1, and after catching the wrong end of some of those strikes, he did switch to the takedown offense. Struggled to keep Giga there, though, and do work, and he lost the split decision. But he went on to outstrike and outwrestle Vince Cachero, who's no longer in the UFC. that poor guy got out-wrestled by Ronnie Lawrence as well, Vince. But then Jamal Emmers, about a year and a half ago, ended up facing Pat Sabatini, had some early success dropping Pat, and then ended up getting heel hooked. So challenging for a heel hook himself even. I think he was challenging for like a toe hold on Pat Sabatini. He got his own leg snatched up immediately and tapped out. So, there's some fight IQ issues in the past of Jamal Emmers, right? Standing and striking with Jamal Emmers, jumping into the guard and trying to grab a toe hold on Pat Sabatini. He kind of has that confidence that he can hang with these people in their arena of mixed martial arts. Not going to be smart to do that and use his high school wrestling against Hussein Askhabov, who's a very talented Russian grappler and a pretty strong finisher as well. 6 knockouts, 10 subs for Hussein Askhabov, who last fought at bantamweight. He spent 3 years now probably getting up to that featherweight spot now that he's a little bit older in his prime. And he has been stateside, Askhabov, for a while now, training at American Top Team for a couple of years. Now, a 23-0 record for Askhabov. You can point to the lackluster resume of some of these guys he's beaten, but the first 12 to 13 fights, the guy was still a teenager. So try to give him credit for we can cut him some slack there. He was still a teen, trying to get that resume and that experience. But heavy leg kicks, good knees to the body in the clinch, and he's got some very good takedowns. Well-timed takedowns, cuts the angle well, even grabs guys and suplexes them. And, then it's vicious ground and pound, elbows to anywhere he can find, the face, the body, anything to be active on top. The thing is, he can jump for guillotine. He can jump for some of these, like jumps for heel hooks and things like that. Stuff you don't want to do at the high level to give up position. So maybe we'll see a maturity from him, maybe not. But either way, at this point, I will trust the 23-0 grappler over the, Jamal Emmers, who's had mixed success with his striking. He's not going to out-wrestle Askhabov in this fight. And at minus 135 on the money line, it's tightened up a bit. I like that price in Askhabov. I probably will make that bet. The wrestling, the youth, I think he's got a speed advantage here. He's going to be giving up the size and the experience to Jamal Emmers, who's had fights in the RFA against Thiago Moises, a win over Corey Sandhagen early on. So the guy's got a better resume, but he's taken on a very good skill set in Askhabov. So kind of a gambling spot. Maybe you stay away from this one since both guys have been out of the cage for a while. But overall, give me the grappler in this matchup. Askhabov by decision is the pick. Up next, we have a women's bantamweight bout between Lina Lansberg and Mayra Bueno Silva. And Bueno Silva actually represents the biggest betting favorite on this entire fight night. She's a minus 425 on some of the better books and a minus 460 even like on DraftKings I've seen her priced at. So Lina Lansberg anywhere around a plus 320 to plus 350 underdog. At 40 years old and on a 3-fight losing streak, if you just look at that, it makes sense. But they're really lining this as if it's going to be a jiu-jitsu match when it could be a striking match on the feet the whole time. Lina Lansberg being a very experienced and very accomplished Muay Thai fighter. She's got very good elbows and knees in the clinch and actually very strong in that position at holding her opponents against the fence. Now, Mayra Bueno Silva has got extremely good BJJ, very dangerous guard. She's got 6 submissions out of her 9 wins as a pro. A lot of those are in the UFC, 3 round 1 arm bars there. She does wrap up the triangle choke pretty good and then can transition to that straight arm bar. Now, she has pretty good striking too. I think she's going to be this more slow, plodding type of fighter who's moving in a straight line, but she's got some pretty strong strikes and she is plodding and flat-footed. Lina Lansberg, ironically enough, as a Muay Thai champion, she's a little bit more lighter on her feet, better lateral movement, very good at being in and out at this point, and still has some pretty good power. There was a recorded knockdown against Carol Hossa in her last fight, but I think that was more of a trip when the feet were together from Carol Hossa and she was going for a leg kick. But nonetheless, still some power there. I think Lansberg, at 40 years old, I would still favor the striking over 3 rounds to Bueno Silva, but not at a minus 425 clip. And the reason I'm talking about that is because Silva doesn't go for takedowns. She's never landed one. I think she's attempted maybe 3 or less in her, UFC fights, her 7 UFC fights so far, where Silva's gone 4, 2, and 1 draw. So even her losses are against some better women, losing to Marina Moroz, losing to Manon Fiorot. Those are forgivable losses, I would say, at the level that she's at. But Still, she's got a good long jab, a good body kick and calf kick, but she can be caught showboating. She can be caught being very one strike at a time. And if she wants to play that game and be a little bit cocky against Lansberg, she could be caught outstruck on the numbers and just outputted the entire time. At least 2 out of 3 rounds is all it takes for that to cover the money line of Lansberg, right? She's definitely got a better chance of the striking fight, more than a plus 350 ticket would imply. So, dangerous spot. I am going to pick Mayra Bueno Silva to win the fight. She's 9 years younger, more powerful. And if this fight does find a way to the mat, I think she will win the fight and at least be super dangerous to do so there. Lansberg does like the clinch. Sometimes the weird things happen in the clinch positions. Trips happens, stumbles happen, and you can find yourself in that dangerous guard of Bueno Silva. So give me Silva to win the fight, but no way I'm touching that money line. I don't hate anybody putting an underdog stab, at least a quarter of a unit even, at Lansberg, who might actually see like close to plus 400 as a dog. So I would just take, if you're going to take a stab on Lansberg, I wouldn't even try to take her by decision or anything like that. I think this is a fair price on her. You're getting the value side on Lansberg here, but at 40 years old, I probably just can't do it. Kicking off the main card at lightweight, a very fun matchup between Jim Miller and Alexander Hernandez is up next. This is a very interesting matchup because these guys have some similarities here despite the big age gap between them. Jim Miller is 39 years old, holds every accolade and record in the UFC for wins and anything to do with the lightweight division, time spent there. He's got a very good submission game and pretty good power in his hands, at least early in the fight. These days, Jim Miller is very round 1 or bust, or at least under 1.5 rounds or bust. He is coming off of 3 consecutive wins, all of them finishes in round 2, all of them under 1.5. The most recent was against the retiring Donald Cerrone, where he got submitted by guillotine to Jim Miller. Alexander Hernandez, coming off of a 2-loss streak. He was pretty much win-loss in his career so far in the UFC. Now he's 5-5 in the organization, but still a very good skill set at 30 years old. He's got extremely good power and accuracy and speed in round 1, but his cardio can fall off. But he's got a good wrestling skill set as well. Hopefully he chooses to use it in this bout. But Jim Miller, look, he hasn't won a decision since like 2016 against a even more washed up, I believe that was Thiago Alves at that point, one of his final fights. Since then, Jim Miller, his output in round 2 and round 3 falls off to almost non-existent. He can get out-grappled in those rounds. So what's the other thing about Jim Miller that I don't like? It's his durability seems to be failing him as well. In a couple of these matches that he's finished, some newcomers like Eric Gonzalez, like Nicholas Mota, they're impressive wins for Jim Miller, but these are newcomers, and he has been facing adversity early in those matches. I believe hurt by both of those opponents, in round 1 before coming back and besting them in round 2. So there's a big skill difference between Alexander Hernandez and Eric Gonzalez and Nicholas Mota, who have been part of Jim Miller's 3-fight winning streak recently. I'm not even going to count the retiring Donald Cerrone. So, even though Hernandez has been on a losing streak, it's been to some pretty good guys. Renato Moicano, Thiago Moises, Drew Dober. So Alexander Hernandez, I think, can put hands on Jim Miller and expose his 39-year-old fight-worn chin at this point. Maybe even put Jim Miller away by knockout in round 1. But if that doesn't happen, I think as this fight passes the over 1.5 round mark, then I think Hernandez can switch to the grappling, use the wrestling and the takedown threat, and just grind out control time over Jim Miller, and maybe throw some ground and pound or try to end the fight that way, or at the very least just ride out a decision over the hard-to-put-away Jim Miller. So I see a lot of paths for Hernandez here as the 9-year younger man. It just seems like there's a certain level of opponent that Jim Miller can beat at this point. Maybe the debuting fighters off the Contender Series. The Nicholas Mota one was very impressive. That's a guy who I think is actually a pretty skilled fighter, but still lacks that veteran savvy. So give me Hernandez here. I think he does get that round 1 knockout on Jim Miller, but if he tries to and fails, if he wears out his gas tank early on Jim Miller, this could get pretty greasy going into the second part of the fight. So at minus 245 on the money line, I'm not sure I'm going to trust Alexander Hernandez at that price tag with my money on the money line, but the fight doesn't go to decision, I'd say, is a good prop. I'd say the under 2.5 That alternate total line is a pretty good bet as well. Somewhere around that minus 200 price tag, I would imagine it's at. So give me Hernandez. I'm going to call around one knockout here. Light heavyweight bout up next between William Knight and Marcin Prachnio. This is a very interesting matchup for a number of reasons. One being that William Knight has not actually been at light heavyweight in quite some time. He fought Devin Clark most recently at heavyweight, weighing in at 251 pounds for William Knight in that fight, and he lost by round 3 TKO after he got tired. I think that was the first TKO stoppage for Devin Clark in the UFC. Before that, William Knight also lost a decision on short notice to Maxim Grishin, also at heavyweight. Supposed to be weighing in at 206 pounds at the most. William Knight came on the scales at 218 pounds for that bout. So he's been steadily growing, but now he's going to go back down to 205 pounds for this bout. Something you want to keep an eye on the scales for, seeing if he makes it or not. Marcin Prachnio, the bigger man at 6'3", but only like an inch of reach or so for the karate fighter. Very good distance striker for Marcin Prachnio from Poland. 15-6 record with 11 knockouts, 1 submission among those 15 wins. So very round one or bust usually. I mean, he has gotten a couple decisions, right? The one over Khalil Roundtree was puzzling because that came after 3 UFC losses all in round one, to Sam Alvey, to Magomed Ankalaev, to Slow Mike Rodriguez. So it seems like Marcin Prachnio definitely has the durability issue in this fight. William Knight pretty durable. He's only been knocked out that last fight, which is more of like a TKO due to fatigue on the part of Devin Clark to William Knight against the fence. He does have a recorded loss to Tafan Nchukwi pre-UFC by TKO, but that was actually like a false, mistaken stoppage by the ref, who thought that William Knight was unconscious, but he clearly wasn't. So William Knight has actually got a decent skill set in this matchup. He's fighting the karate-based striker in Marcin Prachnio, and William Knight is a powerful wrestler. He can take the fight to the mat against a certain level of opposition. And I think Prachnio falls into that umbrella, right? A more technical wrestler like Devin Clark, you can't muscle him around for all 3 rounds successfully. He can turn the tides on you. A guy like Dawoon Jung, who's got the size and the just the physicality, he took William Knight down at will. But yeah, I think William Knight has got the power to, he's got that flat-footed plotting power. He can swing vicious hooks and uppercuts when he advances in range. He could probably knock Prachnio out in round 1, expose the chin. He could also, take the fight to the mat and just wear out Prachnio, who doesn't do too well if the fight leaves round 1 generally. So William Knight does not have the best cardio if he blows his load early trying to finish Prachnio and it doesn't happen. If he tries to grapple with him too much and, doesn't leave enough in the tank for round 2 and round 3, he could get pieced up by Prachnio on the feet later as this fight goes. But I got to say, with the chin problem of Prachnio, I think William Knight actually can land, start stalking down Prachnio, corner him against the fence, and land some dirty boxing and knock him out. So I think William Knight does get a knockout in this fight, but if nothing else, he can still probably win this fight by a greasy decision where he got takedowns early, strikes early, and then maybe slowed down as the fight goes on and still wins that decision. So that's how I see this playing out. I just think there's more ways to win for William Knight here if he makes weight at 205 pounds and this fight happens. So a pretty much dead even pick him on the money line. I'll take William Knight to win this fight. Moving up a weight class to heavyweights, we've got Josh Parisian welcoming Jamal Pogues to the UFC in his debut. Pogues actually had 2 successful decision wins on the Dana White Contender Series. One was a few years ago where he showed off his wrestling, I believe scoring like 7 out of 11 attempted takedowns pretty equally across 3 rounds. Just wasn't enough to impress the boss that year. Pogues went to the regional scene and actually scored a few more wins than his record. Actually got a loss in a headlined bout in the LFA as well to Alex Polizzi, but now he's coming back after a successful Dana White Contender Series striking battle over 3 rounds. And that was actually with a fellow kickboxer in Paulo Renato Jr. from Brazil. So pretty impressive stuff from Pogues. His technique looked pretty good in that fight. He pretty much dictated the pace and where that fight took place. Now, Josh Parisian pretty much uses his big brawling style and his physicality at 6'4" and maxing out that heavyweight limit to really make his mark in the UFC. It's been a rocky road to the UFC, a win on the Contender Series, a failed attempt at the Ultimate Fighter, And then he came back in the Contender Series to get another knockout win. Now he's been trading wins and losses, going 2-2 in the UFC for Josh Parisian over very low-level guys so far. So he was actually about to fight Chase Sherman at the end of last year, and the day of the fight, Josh Parisian woke up with like heart palpitations and called up the fight and went to the ER. So whether that was from a bad weight cut or some other issue, I'm not quite sure, but that doesn't really bode well for him either. He is a plus 205 underdog to the minus 240 favorite in Jamal Pogues making his debut. Josh Parisian, out of 15 wins and 5 losses, he has been finished in 3 of those, but he's coming off of I think a second-round TKO over Alain Baudot in a very sloppy back-and-forth fight where both guys were trying to get top position in that fight. I think Josh Parisian got hurt and dropped, survived, and then came back and used his slightly better cardio to beat Alain Baudot, who's pretty round one or bust. Now, something that has plagued Josh Parisian in both of his UFC losses is that lack of a takedown defense. Both Parker Porter was able to, show better cardio and use the takedowns to nullify Josh Parisian's threat. And so did Dontel Mays a couple fights ago. Dontel Mays really exposed it. He looked like a D1 wrestler out there and actually finished Josh Parisian in round 3 by crucifix. So Josh Parisian, bad takedown defense, bad get-up game. The cardio falls off. He really is hittable on the feet too. He ducks his head a lot to try to swing the overhands and the vicious hooks up close. But I think he can really get countered badly by some uppercuts, maybe some high knees from Jamal Pogues, who's got pretty good technical striking and even better wrestling. So I think he's even a BJJ brown belt as well for Jamal Pogues. So I think that's going to be the game plan for Pogues. That would be shocking if it wasn't, to take down Josh Parisian pretty early in the fight, probably no more than 2 minutes into round 1. I would expect Jamal to start getting those takedowns, racking up ground and pound and control time, and maybe getting Josh Parisian out of there at the end of round 2 or into round 3, the way that Dontel Mays was able to last year. So give me Jamal Pogues. I think he's a minus 240 favorite for a reason. Steep price to pay on a heavyweight debut fighter, but at 27 years old, probably improving. And, he's at a pretty good camp as well. I think he should do well in his debut spot here. Up next, we've got our co-main event of the fight card, Zach Pauga taking on Jordan Wright at light heavyweight, and both guys are making a switch in weight class for this fight. Zach Pauga coming back to his natural weight class at 205 after going on the Ultimate Fighter heavyweight season, and in August he came runner-up. He lost to Muhammad Usman by a brutal left hand in early round 2, KO'd Zach Pauga stiff for his first professional loss. Jordan Wright had a 2-4 middleweight career in the UFC so far. Kill or be killed fighter in every sense of the term for Jordan Wright, who's 31 years old, a karate-based fighter, and he's 12-4 as a pro. I believe all 4 of those are at the UFC level. So Jordan Wright, he got knocked out by Joaquin Buckley, Bruno Silva, Marc-Andre Barriault, and most recently, Dushko Todorovic. So I think that covers all of the losses for Jordan Wright. But kill or be killed fighter at middleweight, he was a very fast starter, had a lot of, I think 7 KOs, 5 submissions, many of them like in Alaska FC and before the UFC. He did have that fight with Ike Villanueva. He won by cut stoppage, and he beat Jamie Pickett. So those are his 2 UFC wins. The rest are all losses, and they all came under 1.5 rounds, except for his last fight against Dushko Todorovic. That was the first fight that actually broke past by, I think, 42 seconds. It broke past the 1.5 round mark. So only the 3rd time in his career that Jordan Wright even saw a second round, and the first time he went over 1.5. So what does this guy need 20 more pounds for? Does he think he's going to be the faster man at light heavyweight? Possibly, but 20 more pounds is going to kill the cardio of Jordan Wright, who already has no cardio. So I think that's a giant red flag already. Zach Pauga at 205 pounds, he's been there before. Now he fought a season at the heavyweight division where he was the faster man, right? He's got pretty good takedown offense and defense. Not bad hand speed, pretty good combinations rushing in. And, he's actually 4-0 in decisions, which means a lot against Jordan Wright. If you can just survive Jordan Wright's onslaught early, you could do very well against him as soon as that clock hits 1.5 rounds. Now, Zach Pauga, we saw the devastating flatline knockout last August to Muhammad Usman. that makes sense. Mo Usman, a giant heavyweight, good power. The strike didn't look like it was that devastating, but, Zach Pauga kind of met him to the punch. But I've seen Zach Pauga actually hurt pretty badly by like a stiff jab in Cage Warriors. So there could be some durability issues early for Zach Pauga, which makes me very worried to see him a minus 300 favorite over Jordan Wright. Like, I get it. Zach Pauga is the pick. He is the side because as soon as this goes into round 2 or round 3, if it even gets there, I think Zach Pauga can put Jordan Wright away. But early on, it could be anybody's fight, and this money line could certainly be like the first 2.5 minutes of a Jordan Wright fight. It should be a pick-em price tag. The guy's got a lot of power, very flashy kicks, and good boxing. But the later this goes, and we've seen Jordan Wright actually start trying to wrestle, maybe change his game plan up a bit in these past couple of fights against Mark Andre and Dushko. But it doesn't go his way. It only serves to tire the guy out even more. And again, I can't harp on this enough, an extra 20 pounds now at 205 pounds. I just don't know what Jordan Wright's doing here. Maybe they gave him no choice. He was, he's 2-4 in the UFC. Like, he's probably at risk of getting cut. But he's an exciting guy. He's up for a couple more fights, but I think Zach Pauga does manage to TKO him probably within, 1.5 rounds as usual. So give me Zach Pauga. Not very confident in this pick whatsoever. Okay, we made it to the main event of the fight night. Jessica Andrade taking on Erin Blanchfield at women's flyweight. For Jessica Andrade, this fight is on 1 week's notice after Taila Santos pulled out. And it's also, I think, like 3 weeks after Andrade's last fight where she mercilessly beat the brakes off of Lauren Lucky Murphy, who, lucky for her, she, I think, received 231 significant strikes over 3 rounds in that fight from Jessica Andrade, who had probably a harder night in the octagon than she had intended to. I mean, most of the women she gets out of there within 1 or 2 rounds. Lauren Murphy, it would have been stopped due to unanswered strikes at many points in that bout, but Murphy would just throw back the occasional combination or at least attempt at showing that she was still with it and still lucid. So it went all the way to the judges' scorecard somehow. But, even through all that, Andrade opened up as a minus 145 favorite over Erin Blanchfield, and I jumped on that bet and put money down on Andrade. I think she does win over Erin Blanchfield, who at 23 years old is a very exciting prospect in any women's division, any weight class. Her grappling is very good. She's super talented. She's been an Invicta, I think, since like age 18 or 19, and a 10-1 record. Her only loss was to Tracy Cortez by a split decision. Very good record. In the UFC, it's been 4 wins in a row, 2 of them by stoppage. So there's a big difference, though, between the level of competition of a former champion in Andrade, who's fought everybody. I think she's got the most wins in the women's divisions, at least tied for that. And I think Andrade actually has probably like more post-fight UFC bonuses than Blanchfield even has professional fights. It's got to be close. But there's a step up in competition. Taila Santos would have been that like stepping stone between this fight and Molly McCann, who Erin Blanchfield just crucifixed in round 1 and defeated last summer. Before that, J.J. Aldrich was actually giving Erin Blanchfield a difficult time in round 1 in that fight, outstriking her, beating her to the punch, and just showed a little bit of like the areas that still need to be improved from Erin Blanchfield, who eventually sunk up a guillotine opportunistically and ended that fight. But still, it was showed the limitations of Erin Blanchfield, who certainly has them at 23 years old. She's not the most physical at this point, probably not in her prime yet, where Jessica Andrade is that just 5'1", 5'2" ball of explosivity. She's got, I think, like 11 round-1 stoppages in her career, and she's ripping to the body of these girls like Cynthia Calvillo and Caitlin Chukagian ended by body strikes in round 1. And there's only 4 losses in the past 7 years of Andrade, and those were all to former champions. Rose Namajunas by a split, Zhang Wei Li, who else was it? Shevchenko, who basically did to Jessica Andrade what Erin Blanchfield did to Molly McCann. I just don't think Erin Blanchfield can do it, especially for the majority of 5-minute rounds. We've seen Andrade have that cardio to keep moving forward, play the zombie, even if she can't get the job done in round 1. But will Erin Blanchfield be able to not only secure the takedowns on Andrade, but then hold her down when she pops back up, take her down again, rinse and repeat? Does she have the cardio to do that? I don't really know. I'm not sure. She definitely cannot hang in the striking with Andrade. I'm not sure how her durability is going to hold up against some of those strikes early. And, Erin Blanchfield, we've not really seen her What happens when she gets taken down? Andrade is a very prolific takedown threat herself with a BJJ black belt. So could Andrade flip the script at some point in this fight? Fake with the striking up top, get Aaron Blanchfield's respect with the striking early, and then switch to a takedown offense. That could happen in the course of a 5-round fight as well. So a lot of ways I see the experience going in the favor of Andrade and all of that veteran savvy, and just the danger, I think, in Andrade warrants that bet. So I bet her at minus 145 when that was on Bet Online. It's since moved a little bit now to like minus 170, minus 190. Once you pass that like minus 200 mark, now we start wondering about like, okay, on short notice, on a few weeks after breaking her hands in the face of Murphy, maybe minus 200 is not the best bet when we have seen Andrade out-grappled before. So the bet is Jessica Andrade. I do like her to win this inside the distance, most likely. Again, it's just a product of the experience, the danger, and you've got somebody in Andrade who's in her physical prime, the prime of her career at 31, versus somebody in Aaron Blanchfield who's just not quite there yet at 23, but certainly time to improve and keep furthering her career. I just don't think this is the spot for her. So give me Andrade inside the distance by TKO. Okay, there you have it, you guys. All the fights broken down for this weekend's UFC card. UFC Vegas 69, Andrade versus Blanchfield. And join me this Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Central Time for my weekly live stream. I'll be having my friend Effie from the Any Action Sportscast channel on my stream to talk money lines, props that we like, our betting spots so far in the week, and just to chat with you guys in the live stream as usual. It's always a good time talking fights in the middle of the week. So hit the like, hit the subscribe, and as usual, I am a partner of the sportsbook Bet US, so check out that promo code in the description if you want a 125% deposit match all the way up to $2,500 as a new customer. Check them out. They do have competitive lines on mixed martial arts as well as other sports. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, and I will talk to you guys very soon. Cheers.